Welcome to Beyond the Lab, a series by the Office of Career Development within the Biomedical Research, Education, and Training Department of the Vanderbilt University School of Medicine. My name is Kate Stewart. I'm here today with Colleen Lawrence, who is a postdoc alum. So tell me about your time here at Vanderbilt doing your training.
Came to Vanderbilt in 2007, and I worked in the biochemistry department under Dr. Larry Marnett. Worked there until about 2011 and did some interesting research. I wanted to do some work in toxicology, and his lab offered those opportunities.
Okay. So what did you do after that?
So then I had to figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up, which was actually more challenging than I thought. So when I came here as a postdoc, I wanted to do the toxicology, as I mentioned, and the reason was I wanted to go into a career in the FBI. Okay. When I finished my postdoc, I wanted to be a special agent. My dad laughed at me because he kept comparing me to the folks in X-Files. And I didn't mention this to Dr. Marnett at the time because it did seem a bit far-fetched. So when I was getting close to the end of my postdoc, I went ahead and started looking into working for the FBI. And actually got through the first round of testing and got an interview offer up in DC. Problem was, I also met someone who ended up being my husband. So I kind of had to make a choice between going off and doing the FBI special agent thing and staying here. And so typically I make choices based on my head and not my heart. But in this case, I made a choice based on my heart, which seems to have worked out well because we've been married 7 years. But all that is to say, after I realized the FBI wasn't going to happen, and I also realized I didn't want to be in a lab for the rest of my life, I didn't enjoy the struggles of like the grant writing and that pressure. I had to figure out what I was going to do. So at that period of time, I started looking for jobs here at Vanderbilt because I did like the atmosphere around here and the work, and found a position over with the Beta Cell Biology Consortium under Mark Magnuson. Okay. And so I started working there as an assistant director for the Beta Cell Biology Consortium.
Okay, and so what, and then you landed now. What do you do now?
So the funding went away. Okay. And that is how I ended up where I am now. So when the funding went away, I had like 2 months to figure out how to get a job. So I was very, very nervous. I had not been in that position before. And I did what I normally do, and I don't know what to do, which is I went back to some of my mentors. I contacted Larry Marnett again, and I said, hey, here's what happened, any ideas? And he immediately said, well, there's a lot of really good work down at Victor, the Vanderbilt Institute for Clinical and Translational Research. Right. And he said, go ahead and send Dr. Bernard, Gordon Bernard, who's the director there, an email, name drop if you need to. Just tell them what happened, tell them your background and your interest, and see if they have any spots. And so I sent that email at 8 o'clock on a Thursday morning, and by 8:10, I had, hey, yeah, we'll send it on to our HR folks, and we'll see if we can get you an interview. Okay. So it worked out well. Okay,
good. So tell me what you do now, like your title and sort of your unit or division.
So I am a manager of translational research, and I'm one of the lead project managers for Victor and research support services. And so basically, Victor is a grant that's supported by the Clinical and Translational Science Awards, or CTSAs. There's 64 of those across the country, and we have one of the 64. Okay. And so the CTSAs and Victor, our award, specifically support our researchers here at Vanderbilt in all aspects of research. Basically, we are the infrastructure support. The shortest way to describe what I do is that we make stuff go. We help investigators from the early stages of research, helping them prepare grants, put specific games together, design studies. We help them do all the regulatory compliance stuff that most folks really don't like. Educational type stuff. We support them through clinical trial startup. We show them, here's some template language, here's paperwork. We help them if they're struggling to recruit participants, help them disseminate information. It's everything from the T0 or basic science spectrum all the way out to T4 and beyond, which is disseminating and getting research out into the communities and practice.
Okay. Translational research. Everyone thinks it's something different. What is translational research? Tell me.
The simplest way to describe it is getting something that you discover at the bench to something that you use at the bedside. Okay. And our job at Victor is to make that happen as quickly, efficiently, and safely as possible.
Okay. So what do you do all day, every day? Like, what are some example activities of, like, if somebody were to just pop into your office, what would they see?
They would see a very different thing on every different day of the week. So there's the typical administrative stuff that we do, which not everybody enjoys, but there, certainly it has to get done. So those things include, meeting scheduling and planning and those project management type stuff. But when you talk about some of the actual like projects that we do, we build tools. For instance, I work with REDCap a lot. I've built our local model of electronic consent. So, a way for patients to be consented instead of using paper, but actually see this more dynamic document when they go through and try to figure out, well, do I want to participate? We've built other kinds of infrastructure tools, just finished building a tool for one group on campus who is trying to figure out, well, we have students coming in who want to do research internships, but before we can let them out into clinic spaces, we need to make sure that they've done all of their training and certification and signed all their paperwork. So we've developed tools to help people track that. So there's tool building. There's meeting planning. So we've done a lot of work at Victor as coordinating centers. So at one point in time, we were the coordinating center for the 64 CTSAs that I mentioned. So we manage national committees. And so that can be developing documents, best practices, policies, standard operating procedures, that sort of thing. So it's all of those types of things. We've done work where we help people develop algorithms. So for instance, we have folks on our team who will review charts, electronic medical records, and try to help define what is it that they're seeing in the chart that can then be turned into an algorithm for something like smoking, which is really hard to define in somebody's medical record, believe it or not. Yeah. So all of those, we do all the things.
Okay, so why is this a good fit for you personally? Like your interests, your skills, like why is this a good fit?
So I think at its heart, when you're a researcher, you're your own project manager because you have to decide what's going to work, how to make the best use of limited resources. You need a timetable. You got to fight for funding and results. And really, that's just a microcosm for what I now do, which is how do I advocate and bring the infrastructure and the resources and support together for my new stakeholders, which in this case aren't me, they're our investigators, and sometimes our patients and community members. So it's a good fit because it takes all of those skills that I learned in grad school, the independent thinking, the how do I plan for those pitfalls and problems, how do I make sure the timetable gets held to, holding people accountable, and then just moving it into the career I have now.
Okay, so if someone who is a current PhD student or postdoc is interested in working at Victor or working in a similar field as you, what would you recommend they do now while they're still a student?
So some of the biggest skill sets for what I do are the networking component and the communication component. So a lot of the work I do now involves working with physicians and with community members. And oftentimes when you work at bench research, you don't necessarily have the opportunity to be out there talking to end users. You're at the bottom of a test tube working on a small project, which ultimately might have a larger impact, but you never actually usually see the impact it has. So get out, networking, be able to talk about your research with people who are not in the sciences. And then the other thing that I do as part of my job is I'm a team lead. So I have 6 to 10 people at any given time who report directly up to me. And that happens to be one of the skill sets that you don't often get when you're a postdoc or graduate student. So opportunities to take on leadership roles, to mentor folks. Those are two big things, people skills and mentoring skills to pick up, kind of to transition into what I do.
Okay, let's talk about your first sort of year on the job. What are the things that you had to learn, that you did learn in your training that you would have had to learn, that first year?
The biggest thing I learned the first year is how to communicate well. So when you work in a lab, you often have a relationship with the few people that you work with. And if you have a question and you need, an answer, I felt comfortable going into Dr. Marnite's lab and going, hey, here's what I want to do. Can we do that? But when you work in a more administrative kind of structure, there's a hierarchy. And so you can't just go, seems like a good idea, I'll do this thing. You have to run it up the chain of command and figure out who needs to be informed and how to best inform them to make sure that when you make the decision, it reflects well on the group. So you kind of basically, the thing is learning how to work, I don't want to say as a team, because I felt like we were as a team in the lab, but just acknowledging that what you do has repercussions and implications far beyond just you and your project, because you always want to reflect well on the team you're with.
Right. How is this job a good fit, work-life balance for you? What is that like?
I have a tremendous amount of flexibility at Victor. The staff there are fantastic. They promote family environment. We have people who, they come to me and they go, I need to bring my kid to work today. Suddenly we don't have school for whatever reason. And so, it's okay. It's not uncommon if people bring their younger children in, to hang out a little bit in the office. They encourage us to have that work-life balance of, when you're done, go home. It's not presenteeism. It's come, get your work done, and go work. And I have the flexibility that if I have to leave early, they don't care if I, work from home sometimes. So there's a lot of opportunity for that. And they're supportive of my extracurricular activities. I like to, I'm an ultra runner, so I do a lot of running. And they have been flexible enough that if I, need to leave and go run a race or whatever, that they're okay. It doesn't seem to bother them. It's my time to do with what I want when it's my vacation. So.
Okay, so you talked about your networking that you had to do in your role. What are some of your personal strategies for building those relationships?
I think it's kind of having this diversity of knowledge about random stuff. Some of the best conversations I get into with folks are about random things. Like I really like sports, and I listen to lots of sports talk, which is probably really nerdy. And so I can get into a conversation about sports with people, and sometimes it catches them by surprise, and we end up talking about sports, but then 10 minutes later, we've then discussed whatever other networking thing that's more important, like a project or who they know or what they know. So there's that piece. A piece that I have developed as I've done some more work with community members is humility, knowing that when you go into a situation, it's okay if you gaffe, if you make a mistake. Most people make mistakes, and having that comfort level and security to go, hey, we have nothing in common, but I feel like we should. And so how do we make that happen? Is it okay if I ask questions and we talk about stuff that, is a little bit different? So those are some of the strategies, the humility, and then just being able to talk about almost anything.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.